Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So Avengers Infinity War is coming up. Marvel's never been doing better, but Marvel fans are more pissed than ever, so I'm going to explain what's going on. As we head into Infinity War the last couple years, this weird thing's been happening at Marvel, where their comics have been doing steadily worse and worse, but their movies have been doing better and better. They've been making more money, they've been doing well with the critics, which is almost unheard of, but this past year they almost hit rock bottom, but they will be saved by Avengers Infinity War. I'll explain how that's going to work. There is a new round of the Spider-Man giveaway too. It's a $20 Comixology gift card. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this video. So right now, Marvel is blowing it up, but when most people think about Marvel, they think about the movies. They don't think about the comics as much, even though there are hundreds and hundreds of stories from all the characters published each year. You have to consider, though, that total comic book sales for all publishers combined worldwide last year was somewhere like close to $1 billion, and Marvel does that with just one of its movies. So the movies are a multi-billion-dollar industry. Their comics, you have to consider that they're like a percentage of total comic book sales, are in the hundreds of millions, so it's a fraction of that. So a lot of people don't always pay attention when really big stuff is happening in the comics, even though there is a really big thing getting ready to happen. The next big arc for Marvel Comics is called Captain America: Secret Empire, and he seems like he's going to be the central focus of their big comic book event later this year that'll spill into next year. So remember, next year is Infinity War, so it's going to be an Avengers year. They'll have already had their first big Spider-Man movie, and typically the comics follow the movies now. Used to be the other way around. Like the reason they did Civil War 2, like the reason they called it that, was because they had Captain America Civil War coming out. Even though in the Civil War title there was very little actual Civil War going on. Not the best big comic book event that Marvel has had. DC Rebirth did way better. And that gets into why people are super upset, because Marvel Comics right now, unlike the movies, are tanking. Their comic sales are a fraction of DC sales. For the last several years, they have been pounding DC in sales, but this past year, they had this big diversity push. They had all new, all different. Now they got rid of Iron Man, they got rid of the Hulk, they replaced them with other characters in their titles, and their sales are tanking. People are pissed. So if you don't read comics and you don't know what's going on, they had their Civil War 2 event. At the end of that, they didn't quite kill off Tony Stark, but they effectively killed him off. And another character called Riri Williams took over his Invincible Iron Man comic with the name Ironheart. So she's wearing the armor. Her AI is actually made of Tony Stark's consciousness. So he's still around, but he's not Iron Man anymore. Dr. Doom stole his armor and stole the title. So remember I said the comics follow the movies now? Well, Sony has a big Spider-Man movie coming out. What a coincidence that Peter Parker is the only character left on top. He's actually doing pretty well in the Marvel Comics right now. He's sort of like the benefactor, the Tony Stark of the Avengers. He's the one with all the money because he has this big billion-dollar corporation. He has his own version of the Avengers Tower, so he's kind of like the Tony Stark of the Marvel Universe right now. But he's the only one. Everybody else is like a slightly different version of their character. There's the female Thor, there's the Amadeus Cho version of the Hulk, and even though they're doing a lot of really interesting things, most comic book fans, after like the first couple issues, got really pissed and like, okay, we want the characters that we love to come back. So Marvel, because their sales are doing so poorly, will probably do their own version of DC Rebirth in another year or two. If they don't do it by Infinity War, it will happen the year after that, just because they have this big Captain America event that's coming up, so they'll probably do that and then decide whether or not to just completely reboot everything, the way that DC did this past year. I did a couple videos about it, but what happened is DC sales had gotten so bad that Jeff Johns and the other powers that be just decided to do a complete reboot where they brought back all the changes that they had made a couple years ago with the New 52. So people were pissed during the New 52. There were a couple characters that maybe you like those comics, but overall, sales started to plummet because all the characters that people loved had gone away. They had completely rewritten all this continuity. So what they did is they pressed the hard reset eject button and we got DC Rebirth. It was amazing, everybody loved it, and it is selling like gangbusters. They're outselling Marvel by a crazy amount, way more than you would ever think possible. So it's a very clear indicator that people are not happy with what Marvel's doing right now, and they're really happy that DC brought back all this old stuff. So you can do the math. Even though the people at Marvel and people at DC get along really, really well, they look at what each other's doing all the time. So mark my words, sales continue to plummet. Marvel will do their own version of DC Rebirth. Now they totally call it something different. They're not going to call it Marvel Rebirth. But because Infinity War is happening next year, they will probably target that for some big event, and they'll use that as a way to reboot all their characters without completely destroying everything that everyone's loved for so long. So if you've been reading comics for a long time, this is nothing new to you. There's always like a stretch of comics or some big story arc that just doesn't pay off. Marvel and DC will always double down and come back with something that's even better. But the problem is that it takes a long time to publish a comic, and it takes a long time to make a movie. So if there's like a movie that Marvel has in the future that doesn't do really well, it'll take them a little while to come back with something even better. But I think the best example of that are the Thor movies. As a franchise, Thor has done really well at the box office. Critically, not so much. If you go back after watching Captain America Civil War and try to watch the first Thor film or even the second Thor film, you'll just shake your head and wonder what's going on. Even watching the first Avengers film almost feels like you're watching a long episode of TV because of the way they filmed it. So a lot of those early problems that Marvel had, they slowly ironed out. Technical issues, the way they filmed things looks better now. But Thor Ragnarok, just because it takes so long to make these sequels, is going to be one of the best, weirdest films ever. And the weird part is the reason why it's going to be so cool. So you have all these great actors, but the problem is that when Marvel was first getting started with its movies, it was such a big financial risk that they tried to make the most least objectionable movies possible. Like they just sanded all the edges off, all the interesting stuff down, so that nobody would be upset, they wouldn't offend anyone, nothing would be weird. But then Kevin Feige was able to sort of like break off and do his own thing, and now they are free to be as weird as they want. They've earned that trust from the fans. So it took a while to get there, but you look at movies like Doctor Strange and like Ant-Man, totally weird compared to the straight-up Avengers films, but did really well financially for the type of movies that they were, very small in comparison. So that is why I'm so excited about what's going on with Marvel movies, just the fact that they're embracing that weirdness but staying true to the characters. And that is the same reason that the comics are tanking right now, is because comic book fans feel like they're not being true to those characters. Like, you have an Iron Man comic book with no Iron Man in it. Why would you want to read that? A lot of the comic book sales now are driven by movie watchers that want to read adventures with those characters. But you can't do that with any of Marvel's comics right now. All of the straight-up heroes that you see in the movies are off doing other things or they're dead. Kevin Feige and all the directors, producers, actors have teased that Infinity War in the movies is going to be the culmination of all the types of things that they've been doing since Phase 1. Going forward after that, everything is going to be very different, even though they'll still be very true to the characters. Now, what does that mean? So we haven't seen Thor Ragnarok yet, but they're talking about more buddy road trip type movies where you have team-ups like you have Iron Man in a Spider-Man movie. There'll be a lot more crossovers, more small weird movies. So like the next time you see a Captain America movie, you might see him with Black Panther. Like they might do that instead of doing another Captain America sequel. Now that doesn't mean that they're not going to do sequels anymore, but they're just going to do a lot more mixing and matching with characters. Infinity War is really that point of transition. So that is probably when they'll target for their Marvel Comics Rebirth, where they bring everybody back in new interesting ways, but they do it in a way that's true to those comic book characters. So you guys can let me know, what do you think about Marvel Comics in this past year? Most people have been complaining, like most people just are really unsatisfied. But how long do you think it's going to be before they roll back all these changes? You have to imagine that the same thing was kind of happening at DC Films. Like they're slowly working the kinks out. So it's like, okay, we have some really awesome things here, but the characters aren't exactly the way we want them to be, so we'll fix this a little bit going forward. Everybody will be happy. It'll be wonderful. But publishing comics, making movies, it just takes a lot of time. So even though they might already be making those changes, they definitely already made those changes at DC Films. But Marvel Comics, you might not see that payoff till later this year or even next year. So if you're a hardcore comic book fan, you know that you should just stick it out. It'll all be fine in the end, but it just might take a little while to get there. There was some new Spider-Man and Legends footage that just dropped, so I'll probably do videos for that next. I have some Game of Thrones I want to post, and they've been talking about Green Lantern, so I'll try to get that stuff out as fast as possible. There's a whole bunch of really cool comic book news that just dropped. While you guys wait for that to post, you can click here to learn all about Superman Black costume hype, and you can click here to learn all about the future of X-23 and the Wolverine character inside the X-Men universe. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.